Hidden deep within the Appalachian Mountains, shrouded by mist-filled valleys and impenetrable forests, the truth of the Caldwell family lay buried for decades, a secret whispered on the wind but never fully grasped. This is the story of a clan that, beginning in 1850, chose a path of profound isolation, not just geographical, but genetic, forging one of the most devastated and medically significant bloodlines from the practice of close-kin marriage ever recorded on American soil. This is a journey back through time, a forensic examination of how a single patriarch's dream of purity became a multi-generational nightmare, revealing how decisions made over a century ago irrevocably shaped the destiny of hundreds of souls. It is an investigation into how seclusion, poverty, and antiquated beliefs conspired to transform a prosperous pioneer family into a harrowing, textbook case study on the catastrophic effects of prolonged inbreeding. Our story opens in the tumultuous year of 1847. Thomas Caldwell, a prosperous timber merchant from the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, weary of the increasing industrialization and social strife of the East, decided to lead his family into the untamed Western lands. He was a man driven by a potent mix of ambition and fundamentalist faith. Accompanied by his wife, Sarah, their 5 sons and 2 daughters, 3 of his brothers and their families, and a handful of other like-minded families, they formed a wagon train of the devout and the disillusioned. After months of arduous travel, they settled in a lush, secluded valley in what is now known as McDowell County, along the rugged border of Kentucky and western Virginia. The land is fertile and the mountains rich with coal, Thomas wrote in his personal diary, a ledger recovered in 1978 by local historians. God has provided all we need. Here, far from the corrupting influences and moral decay of the cities, we shall build a new Eden, a community founded on true Christian values and untainted blood. This legitimate and promising venture would soon meet its first great trial. The outbreak of the American Civil War in 1861 fractured the nation and violently severed the Caldwells' tenuous ties to the outside world. Historical records indicate that, fiercely independent and fearing conscription by either side, the Caldwell men fortified their settlement and moved their families even deeper into the labyrinthine mountains, discovering a nearly inaccessible valley locally known as Hollow Creek. This insulation, first a desperate protective measure, became a permanent state of being after the war's end. The War of Northern Aggression, as they called it, only solidified their contempt for a government they distrusted. Instead of reintegrating with a rapidly developing society, the Caldwells chose to remain in their mountainous refuge, their ethos of self-sufficiency curdling into a deep-seated paranoia and a fanatical belief in their own separation. It was within this pressure cooker of isolation that the first sanctioned marriage between first-degree cousins occurred. In 1879, Joseph Caldwell, Thomas's grandson, wed his cousin Elizabeth. According to Joseph's diary, preserved by Kentucky's Historical Society, this decision followed a disastrous trip to a nearby mining town to find a wife. He returned, humiliated and disgusted, writing, "The girls there are frivolous, impure, and their faith is a shallow well. Their eyes are full of greed and worldliness. Elizabeth is of this soil. She understands our customs, our struggles, and our values. Our blood is strong, and it will remain pure. We need no other." This union, while not uncommon in many rural American communities at the time, established a dangerous theological precedent that would be repeated with increasing frequency and diminishing choice in the generations to follow. As the family expanded within its isolated bubble, the pool of potential spouses shrunk catastrophically. What we observed with the Caldwells was not merely a case of occasional inbreeding, but a systematic, culturally enforced practice that intensified over several generations, explains historian Dr. Margaret Hollingsworth of the University of West Virginia, who has extensively studied the family's records. By 1920, their family tree, meticulously recorded in their own Bibles, was not a tree at all, but a tangled thicket of repeated names and converging lines. Virtually every family member was a multiple descendant of Thomas and his brothers. The first visible, undeniable signs of this continuous interbreeding emerged in the 3rd generation. Medical records from 1915, found in the estate of a local doctor, document the birth of 3 Caldwell children with profound atypical physical characteristics, including polydactyly, extra digits, severe mandibular hyperplasia, underdeveloped jaws, and significant cognitive impairments. Dr. Elijah Montgomery, a weary rural physician who occasionally made the difficult journey to tend to the community, noted his observations with growing alarm. Problematic births among the Caldwells have become frighteningly frequent, he scrawled in his personal notes. I attempted to counsel them on the well-documented risks of close-kin marriage, but was met with stony silence and outright hostility. I was accused of being an agent of the outside world, sent to corrupt their chosen path. Their isolation is not just physical, it is a wall around their minds. The Great Depression of 1929, which crippled the nation, only served to further validate the Caldwells' chosen path of seclusion. While the rest of the country grappled with economic collapse and breadlines, the Caldwells, already hardened by decades of isolation and self-sufficiency, withdrew completely. They viewed the outside world's suffering as divine punishment for its sins. It was during this period of intensified isolation that the most extreme and taboo practices, marriages between siblings and half-siblings, are documented to have begun, a logical, horrific endpoint of their closed system. A glimmer of outside awareness flickered in 1937. A young, idealistic social worker named Arthur Shaw, dispatched as part of New Deal initiatives to aid forgotten communities, managed, through sheer persistence, to gain a brief visit to the Hollow Creek settlement. His report, filed with the Library of Congress and later unearthed by researchers, offers a chilling, first-hand glimpse. The Caldwell community, comprising approximately 60 individuals, exists in conditions of medieval poverty and profound isolation. The cabins are crude and dilapidated. I observed numerous cases of obvious physical deformities, cleft palates, distorted limbs, and behaviors that seemed detached from reality. The most disturbing aspect was their perception of these traits. When I cautiously questioned the prevalence of these conditions, an elder stated, without a hint of irony, that they were God's marks, signs of their family's chosen status and separation from the impure world. I urgently recommend immediate intervention by public health authorities. Despite this stark warning, no action was taken. The looming storm of World War II diverted all government resources and attention, leaving the Caldwells to continue their insular path of endogamous marriage, untouched and unhelped for another generation. The 1950s marked the point where the biological toll of a near century of concentrated consanguinity became impossible to ignore, even for the family itself. An unofficial census conducted in 1952 by a determined public health nurse documented that of the 82 Caldwell members living in Hollow Creek, 37 exhibited significant physical anomalies. The list was a medical catalogue of rare genetic disorders, dwarfism, craniofacial malformations, syndactyly, webbed fingers, profound visual and auditory impairments, and a spectrum of cognitive disabilities. The gene pool had become a stagnant pond, and the recessive mutations within it were now expressing themselves in nearly half the population. The family's harrowing situation remained a local secret until 1956, when veteran journalist Robert Thornton of the Louisville Courier-Journal caught wind of strange rumors about a tribe of throwbacks in the mountains. Initially seeking a simple human interest story on a vanishing way of Appalachian life, Thornton instead uncovered a profound human tragedy. After months of effort, he gained the fragile trust of a few younger family members who occasionally ventured out to trade handicrafts for essentials like salt and ammunition. His subsequent article, entitled The Forgotten Valley, splashed across the front page and caused a national sensation. Hidden in the mountains of our own state, Thornton wrote, exists a community of Americans that time has forgotten. The Caldwell family lives in a near-total isolation unimaginable in this modern age, perpetuating marriage practices modern science long ago recognized as biologically disastrous. The result is a community where genetic deformities and cognitive deficiencies are not anomalies, but the norm. The article, accompanied by grainy, haunting photographs, triggered a firestorm of public outrage and pity. Social assistance organizations, religious groups, and state authorities all announced plans to intervene. The Caldwells' response to this sudden, unwelcome attention was to retreat even deeper. They barricaded the single wagon trail into Hollow Creek, posted armed guards, and threatened any outsider who approached. Their siege mentality, cultivated for generations, was now activated in full. Thornton's investigation peeled back another layer, the complex belief system the family had constructed to rationalize their suffering. Interviews with the few communicative members revealed a syncretic ideology blending a distorted, isolationist interpretation of biblical scripture with a fervent belief in their own genetic exceptionalism. Caldwell blood is special, family patriarch Jeremiah Caldwell stated in a rare, tense interview. The outside world is contaminated by sin and weakness. We preserve our purity through the generations, and the marks on our bodies are signs of that distinction, a covenant with God, not curses as the ignorant believe. This potent narrative, a classic example of adaptive justification, was used to sanctify even the most extreme unions, as later documented in recovered family Bibles that recorded unions with shockingly close coefficients of relationship. The social upheaval of the 1960s finally brought the force of the federal government to their doorstep. President Johnson's war on poverty specifically targeted the isolated hollows of Appalachia. Roads were carved through the mountains, schools were built, and social services expanded. These tentacles of the modern world finally began to brush against Hollow Creek. The catalyst for confrontation came in 1967, after a trapper who traded with the family gave anonymous testimony to a county sheriff about children living like animals with severe, untreated medical conditions. A team of social workers and health professionals, accompanied by state police for protection, finally forced their way into the valley. What they discovered was a vision from another century. The initial team's report described scenes of severe neglect and untreated suffering. Children with cleft palates couldn't eat properly, individuals with congenital heart conditions gasped for breath, those with limb deformities dragged themselves through the dirt. The intervention resulted in the immediate, heart-wrenching removal of 14 of the most vulnerable children, all under 12, who were placed into state custody. The action triggered a violent, predictable response from family patriarchs who saw it not as rescue, but as theft. A standoff ensued, shots were fired, and in the tragic confusion that became known as the Hollow Creek Siege, 2 state troopers and 3 Caldwell men lost their lives. It was a devastatingly bloody price for first contact. The 1970s became a decade of painful and reluctant study. The 14 removed children became the subjects of intense medical and psychological examination. A comprehensive 1972 report by the Kentucky Department of Health detailed the genetic consequences of generations of inbreeding with cold, scientific precision. Dr. Richard Stevenson, the lead geneticist, noted, "The young Caldwells present a constellation of anomalies consistent with extreme genetic homozygosity. We see an alarming incidence of rare conditions, polydactyly, cardiac defects, skeletal dysplasia, microcephaly. Most worrying is the polygenic burden many individuals suffer from multiple severe conditions simultaneously, a phenomenon almost unheard of in an outbred population." Stevenson's team calculated the inbreeding coefficient, F, a measure of the probability that an individual has inherited 2 identical copies of a gene from a common ancestor. In the general population, F is close to 0. For the offspring of first cousins, it is 0.0625. Among the Caldwell children studied, the values ranged from 0.25 to a staggering 0.375, levels typically seen only in the offspring of siblings or parent-child unions. The Caldwell case quickly became a grim staple in medical school curricula, a stark, numerical illustration of the dangers of genetic isolation. For the family members who remained in Hollow Creek under the state's new, watchful eye, government intervention was a profound and unwelcome upheaval. Social workers reported fierce resistance to changing marriage practices, even when presented with clear evidence of the resulting genetic damage. Martha Caldwell, then 4'2" and one of the few without obvious physical anomalies, became a reluctant spokesperson. In a 1975 interview, her words echoed with defiance and love, "You come here with your diplomas and your laws, saying our way of living is wrong. But who are you to judge? For generations, we Caldwells have taken care of our own. We love our children no matter how they come into this world. Out there, they'd be ridiculed, put in homes. In here, they are family. They belong." This perspective, deeply human yet tragically misguided, stood in stark contrast to the objective medical data. The inevitable, final act of the Hollow Creek chapter occurred in 1977. A tragic fire, sparked by a knocked-over kerosene lamp, raced through the cluster of tinder-dry cabins. 5 family members, all with limited mobility due to genetic conditions, perished in the flames. The state authorities, citing the dangerously inadequate and now destroyed living conditions, ordered the complete evacuation of Hollow Creek. The 37 remaining members were relocated to government-subsidized housing in nearby towns. This forced diaspora was deeply traumatic, particularly for the older generations, but it finally, irrevocably, broke the cycle of extreme isolation. For the first time in over a century, Caldwells were forced to interact daily with the wider world. The 1980s ushered in an era of advanced genetic understanding. The University of Kentucky launched a major study, led by Dr. Stevenson, combining genealogy with cutting-edge genetic mapping. They constructed a vast family tree, a web of intersecting lines, and collected DNA samples. Their findings were published in 1988. The Caldwell genome was exceptionally homogeneous. They identified 27 specific harmful recessive mutations that occurred at alarmingly high frequencies. Most significantly, they discovered a unique mutation, dubbed the Caldwell variant, in a gene responsible for a severe form of phenylketonuria, PKU, which explained the high rates of neurological decline. This mutation had arisen in a single ancestor, likely one of Thomas's brothers, and through generations of inbreeding, had become widespread, affecting nearly 40% of the family. For the Caldwells themselves, the 80s and 90s were a period of uneven adaptation. The younger generations, like Rebecca Caldwell, a child removed in 1967, began to integrate, some with remarkable success. Rebecca, though she bore the physical marks of her lineage, excelled academically, earned a degree, and became a powerful advocate, transforming her family's shame into a lesson for others. She helped establish the Caldwell Foundation for Genetic Research in 1999. Older members, like Ezekiel Caldwell, never adjusted, dying bitter and longing for the lost community of Hollow Creek. The story of the Caldwells is ultimately one of both profound warning and resilient hope. It is a stark lesson in population genetics, a living testament to the vital importance of genetic diversity. Yet, it is also a narrative of redemption. The latest generations, born from outmarriage, are healthier. Some, like Dr. Thomas Caldwell, a great-grandson of the last Hollow Creek patriarch, have even dedicated their careers to medicine and genetics, using their intimate history to help others. Their suffering has contributed to science, leading to new treatments for rare diseases. Today, the name Caldwell still carries a stigma in some quarters, a whisper of the inbred family. But it also speaks of survival. The community center established by the foundation near the original homestead is not a recreation of isolation, but a place to honor the past while embracing the future. As Martha Caldwell poignantly reflected before her death, for a long time, we thought we were protecting ourselves from the world. Only later did we understand we were imprisoning ourselves. The blood we shared connects us, but it is in the mixing of new blood that we found our strength and renewal. Their history is a dark chapter in the American story, but one that deserves to be remembered, a permanent reminder of the delicate balance between tradition, identity, and the immutable laws of biology.